Okay, so today is going to be just a basic kind of beginner's guide to Cinema 4D. Now, every program kind of has different ways that they start with, that people can start from. For me, I always find that the best way is just get yourself familiar with the paths and what they do. And so what I mean by that is, after you've installed Cinema 4D, just go into your, wherever you installed it to. So for me, it's my local disk, and then Program Files, Maxon, and then Cinema 4D, and kind of get yourself familiar with what all these different parts in here do. So for example, like the library, for example, what this will do is if you go into browser and you drop what's called a lib4d file, so if you get any asset packs off the internet, they'll normally come in a lib4d file. This is my own asset pack that I developed over the last little while, so I'm just going to drop this in here, and I'll show you what that looks like later on inside Cinema 4D itself. Also inside of these, you also have the plugins folder, which for the plugins folder, if I just go ahead and open that in a new window, and then go graphic design, and then find some Cinema 4D plugins, which are here. So if you have any plugins for Cinema 4D that you find online that you want to import, you just basically come to here. So that's going to be under Program Files, Maxon, Cinema 4D, and then Plugins. And all you do is just find the folders. In this case, I'm going to be putting in Throwsy, Reaper, Magic Preview, and Ivy Grower. These are all just a couple different plugins that I like that I'm just going to be copying into there. And you just copy the whole folders and have admin rights, hit continue, and then there you go. Now these plugins have been installed. And so yeah, I just kind of think that helps just down the road so that people don't have to go looking up videos on how to do all that stuff later on for really basic stuff. Okay, so now let's actually open up Cinema 4D. So I'm using Studio R17 right now. And so this is what you're starting with. So this right here, this box, what you'll get on startup is called the viewport. And so if it looks a bit different, you may have a different layout. So up in this corner over here, there's this thing called layout. So if you get stuck in a different layout, like if you're in the animation layout, for example, it might look completely weird. I have no idea how to do animation, so this is just like a completely foreign thing to me. But the standard one that you want to do is startup, which is the initial one that you get first when you start up, and it's the one that most people use. There are also user ones. If you get down the line and you want to start editing stuff, then you can have user menus and then change your own layout. But for me, I just use startup because it's much simpler. So this top row here, in no kind of order particularly, it just goes, oh, I don't know where all of my icons just went. I don't know what's happening. Oh, I'm sorry. It's standard, not startup. That's why. That's why those all disappeared. It's because if you go on startup, startup is just these two. You have to go on standard, and that will give you everything back. Sorry, my apologies. So let's look at some of the stuff that we have going on up here. So at the top here we have files. This is how you create new files. This is how you merge in different file types. So if you have like a .ai file that you've drawn out in Illustrator, this is how you import it. It would be through here. Sorry if you guys can hear my phone going off in the background. I did not prepare well enough and I completely forgot to unplug it, so turn it off. So yeah, there's also export if you want to export it to a different type of file for anybody else to use with any other program. You just do it down here. There is also save. There's different forms of saving. So the saving the project with assets. So any textures that you have, it will save it with those textures in a different folder. And this is just how you would save just over here. There's also in edits, you have something, and sorry, this is just kind of a bit of a tangent. This is kind of important as well. If you're planning on using a drawing tablet with Cinema 4D, you will definitely have to come into edits and go under preferences, and under input devices, make sure you check mark graphics tablet. If you don't, it won't work properly, and it will just be impossible for you to be able to use your tablet with it, especially if you have like a Microsoft Surface that you're planning on using with Cinema 4D, then for sure put this on as well. Graphics tablet, just check mark that. I am not, so I'm just not going to do that. Yeah, and the rest of these, there's a lot of good things up here, but they get kind of more complicated and they kind of each have their own use case, but you'll get to learn those as you go. The other ones just to be aware of is that Cinema 4D, I don't remember, I am on Studio R17, I don't know what version you guys would be on, but some of the later versions now have a motion tracker. If you need that, you can find that up there, and also sculpting options are up here as well. But if you're going to do any sculpting, my recommendation would just be to straight up switch to the sculpting mode if you're going to do that, because it's really hard to do it with just the general viewport. Now, let's talk about setting up the asset libraries, which is what I did when I just dragged those across. So as you'll see on the side here, you have objects. There's also, a bit further down, those content browsers. So pre-installed with Cinema, there will be different presets, which you'll just find in here. These might look a bit different depending on which versions you have, but this is the one that I imported earlier. So this is assets. And then for me, I have scenes, photo reveal. These are all stuff that I've created myself, and this is just all different things that I've accumulated over the last little while. But just in, let's go for example into Studio, maybe even like example scenes. Oh, oops, sorry, kind of jumping around. Like Studio into like example scenes. I don't know, let's just open up a random scene, share abstract, that works. Yeah, so now we have just a scene in here that I just grabbed from the defaults. There's nothing really too special about this. I actually have never seen this scene, but I guess that's what it looks like from the outer view. And yeah, so if you guys actually want to set up your own asset library, which I would highly recommend doing because it helps keep everything organized, all you have to do is when you normally go into content browser, just go to presets and then click on any folder and then hit open a new browser. And what you want to do is go, alright, I'm sorry, click on presets and then click open a new browser. And then just go new preset library and then give it a name. So name, just do that. And then inside presets now you'll have a folder called name. So let's open that in a new browser, and let's say that you wanted to add a wall into there. There you go. Now whenever you want to, if you open a new scene, if you ever want to use that wall again, you now just go into your content browser, go into name, and then just drag the wall in, and now you have the wall. And this, you can also, inside here, you can also add folders as well. So when you're inside here, you can hit right click and just hit new folder and add the wall folder, and then just drag all this stuff into the wall folder. And then now it's just inside a folder. This is just really helpful for organizing stuff inside of Cinema 4D, so you don't have to consistently jump out of Cinema 4D to grab all your assets that you have. I would recommend just getting used to using that. It's just a lot faster in my opinion. Now, let's just go back to what you guys would see. So this is what you guys would see when you first start up. Let's talk about making basic objects. So Cinema 4D, there's multiple ways to make different objects, but probably the simplest way is just right here along these top rows here, there's going to be a little cube. And so this is going to be, if you just click it, you'll add a cube into the scene. But if you want to add a different type of object, you just click and hold, and then it will come up with a whole bunch of different objects. So you have, like, if you want to add a platonic, then there's that. If you want to add whatever you wanted to add, then you just click and hold, and then move across, and then click whatever you wanted to add. Now, making a good point out of that, actually, if I just add these two back in, when you add objects, they'll pop up in the sidebar here. And so if you wanted to say, let's say you wanted to get rid of the cube, what you do is you click and then just hit delete on your keyboard, and actually delete, not backspace. Don't think backspace. Oh no, backspace works as well. Okay. So yeah, you just hit backspace on the keyboard, and that's how you would get rid of anything that you didn't want. Now, let's say you wanted it still to be in the scene for later, but you just wanted to hide it so that you can't see it for the meantime. There's a couple ways to do that. One of them is you can click, in this instance, you can click this little X here, and it will disappear. Or if it's an object that isn't just a base object, which some programs, they call them primitives. I've heard them called a couple other things in different programs. I'm just going to call them objects for all intents and purposes. But there's also these little little things here, these little circles. So if I click the circle, first time it'll go green, but then if I click it again, it'll go red. And so what that means is that now it's disappeared from my viewport. Remember, this is called the viewport. And so now it's gone from my viewport. But if I rendered this out, which is like the final step in the process, it would still be there because this second box here is the render viewer. And so what that means is that once it's been rendered, it'll still be in here. So what I mean is I'm just going to render this really quickly. And so you see that this cube is still there. What I have to do to get rid of it in the render view, which I'll go over in a bit here, is you have to make sure that this is on red. So I could have it be visible in here, and now because this one's red, it's not visible in the render. And that's a pretty helpful tool, especially if you're going to have like backups of stuff. So like if you were going to start editing this cube and you wanted to keep a backup of it, then you just control and then drag and you can create a new one. And then you could just hide this one and then keep this one. And now whatever you want to do with this one, and then let's say you screw it up, you just delete this version and you still have that backup. Okay, now basic object movement. So Cinema 4D is a 3D modeling program, obviously, so there's going to be 3 axes. So this is I believe this one is the Z-axis. And this one is your x-axis, and this one is your y-axis. And then if you hit Control-Z, you can undo anything that you do in Cinema 4D. So that's just what I did there. Now, along with movement, there's also rotate, which is just up here in these row of icons here. There's rotate, which will allow you to rotate the object as much as you want. And then there's also scale, so you can scale up and scale down the object. Also for basic objects like this Platonic here, there will also be these little things here, which you can also just click and drag, and you can do the same thing. If you have, like for example, a square, there'll also be different ones for different directions. So if you wanted to expand it along the x-axis here, you just click this one and drag. If you want to expand it along the z, you click this one and drag. If you want to expand it along the y, you click this one and drag. Okay. So, now, all of the very, very utter basics out of the way, let's just talk about the viewport itself, I guess. So, along with moving objects around, you can also move around within the 3D space itself as well. So, being able to move around, the easiest way to do it is just on the viewport here. There's going to be a couple buttons up in this right-hand corner of it. So, this one is going to be how you move. So, this is just going to allow you to move around in the viewport. This one's how you zoom in and zoom out. So, these ones you actually click and hold and then move. So if I'm clicking and holding right now and then I move my mouse around, that's how I'm moving around. If I click and hold and then scroll my mouse up, like start moving my mouse up, it will start zooming in. If I scroll it out, then it'll start zooming out. But I can also do this just by placing my mouse pointer inside, pointing at where I want to go, and actually just using the scroll wheel. That'll also help you to zoom in and zoom out. And then this one is rotate, which will allow you to just move around a fixed point, or if you're selecting an object, it'll let you move around the object as your point of reference. Pretty basic, but there is also another layer to this as well, where you can have, if you click this little button in the side here, this will bring up your multiport window. And so what this means is, in this instance, it's kind of hard to tell because it's just a square, but let's go back to adding the Platonic, for example, and what you can see here is that this is the top view, as it'll say in the things up here, and this is relative to this axis. So this is relative to if you were looking at it from this perspective right here, is what this is relative to. So this is looking at it from the top here. So like if I bring this up, as you can see, the front down here, it moves up, and the right it moves up, but on here it looks straight on because this is the top. But if I move it this way or that way, you can see this will just help you in some instances, especially if you're dealing with fairly large files, trying to be able to see where the lines are of multiple objects at once and being able to line them up all together, and also just being able to see what it looks like from all different angles, because right now if I was just looking at this like this way, I wouldn't be able to tell exactly how high up it is in relative to the cube. But now I can see that it is, based on these lines, it is exactly aligned. And as you can see inside of here, there's also the same things you can move around inside each individual one of these viewports, and you can zoom in and zoom out, and you can rotate, but it's not the same sort of rotation. It just rotates side to side. And also in these viewports, if you accidentally skew it a bit and you want to go back to perfectly straight, what you do is click on the rotation tool again and hold shift and then move, and it will move in 10-degree increments. Okay. Now, to get back into your main view from here, what you do is if you want to zoom in on any one of these windows, you just click this small window icon here to go back into it. So if you click on here, for example, and you want to see just the top view as your main screen, then you click on the top view, and there you go. If you wanted to see the right view, you click that, click out, click back, click back. There you go. So, now, let's talk about making a basic text object. So, with these two, you can make basic objects themselves, and let's say you wanted to make some text. I mean, if you wanted to, you could try really hard, and you could do like try and make like a K or something out of like doing it like this. If you really wanted to, I guess that's kind of your prerogative if you want to do something like that. But there is actually text built into Cinema 4D. And so where you'll find it is just under the MoGraph, and then you'll find just down here it'll say MoText. And this is in most versions of Cinema 4D after, I believe, R13. They might be there beforehand, but I've only ever used R13 as the lowest version that I've ever used. So, okay, now click on MoText, and there we go. Now I got a bit of text. Now you can align this actually based on the axis pretty easily just inside of the settings tab here. So there's left, middle, and right if you want to do that based on the y-axis. So let's say you want it in the middle, and let's say you just want to put descent, for example. There you go. And you have to actually click off of the object for it to update. So as you saw, if I just type in text and then leave it, it's not going to do anything. You have to actually click off of the object in what's over here. This window is called the hierarchy. You have to click off of the object and then click back into it to keep editing after that. So there's a bunch of options in here. You can change the height of the text, which just makes it taller, but it'll also make it a bit wider as well. There's the horizontal spacing to change the distance between the letters, if you want to do that. Vertical spacing to change the distance if you have stacked text, if you have text, like that, for example. Then vertical spacing will change how much the difference is between the two of them. You can also angle them, which kind of just like cuts into the angles of the letters a bit. And there's a whole bunch of other settings in here. I'm not going to really go into them, but yeah, that's how you add basic text. If you want to change the font to any system fonts that are installed, you just do this and click on whatever you want, and it'll change the text as well. So let's talk about once you, for example, you've started making a scene. So now you have like a cube, for example, and you have like a sphere, and I don't know, cone maybe. Sure, let's do that. And then also you have, for example, a floor, which basically what the floor does is it's like a flat plane, but it goes on infinitely. I know it doesn't look like it in here, but when you actually render it out, again, it'll have an inflated floor. Now, these kind of look a bit boring right now, and that's because they have absolutely no textures on them, so they are using the base textures of whatever you set up in the project settings initially. By default, it's this gray-blue color. So if you want to add a texture, what you can do is come down here, and you can either hit Create and then New Texture or New Material, or you can just double-click and it will make a new material inside of here. Now you can edit in this tab over here if you want. Personally, what I prefer to do is just if you double click on the material itself, it'll come up and it'll give you a live view here, and it'll let you change all the different what's called channels. I'll try and go over making materials sometime later on, but for now we're just going to make a pretty basic one. I'm not going to explain what I'm doing. I'm just going to make a quick basic material just to show you some stuff. So let's do GGX. Brighter. Maybe we'll actually make it like a nice blue color. And what you can do is to apply this material now, you can either click, hold, and drag onto an item to drop it into there, or you can do it on the hierarchy. So you can drag it and then drag and drop onto it in the hierarchy. So now all of these have the blue, but I want my floor to be a different material. All you do is just double click, create another new material, and let's just drag and drop that onto there. Beautiful. Now we have that. Now it's kind of hard to see because it's really bright material, so I'll make this a bit darker so you can see the plane. Okay, so now let's talk about rendering, which is something that is a lot more complicated than people would think, and I'm not going to go over a whole bunch of this video. I'm just going to show you how to do a basic render. So up in this corner here, these are your render settings right here. So everything itself is kind of self-contained. So you have like the all the movement and manipulation tools over here. You have the different selection tools on this corner. You have your render options here, and you have your actual like adding in different things to the scene right here. That's kind of the basic layout. So let's click on this button with the little gear. That's how you edit the render settings. Now, if you're just doing test renders and you're not actually doing your final render yet, what I'd recommend is leaving this at 800 by 600 or even possibly turning it down. This is going to be the resolution that it's going to output at. So most people's monitors are normally 1920 by 1080. Mine is 2560 by 1080. That's probably why you guys can see it might be, you might have black bars on your video on YouTube. That's because I'm using what's called a 21 by 9 aspect ratio, so it's a bit more annoying for me, but yeah, so basically all you do is you just literally you highlight and type in whatever you want. So for me, for example, if I wanted it to be a 2560 by 1080 render, then I just say 2560 and then do 1080. And as you saw on the viewport, now it's all skewed because this doesn't update until you finish typing, until you've actually clicked off again. So right now it's actually 2560 by 600 because that's what it was previously. So once I click off, it will now update. Just keep that in mind as well. And then this you can look up later on. This is your DPI. You can look that up later on. For me, normally I set to 401. That's normally what most phones are. But you don't have to touch this. You can even deal with it later. Save. So if you want to output a file, then you can choose how you want to save it here. By default, it's always set to TIFF. I'm not a big fan of TIFF. I normally just change this to JPEG. Or if I'm not going to be saving anything, then I just uncheck the save box. But JPEG normally what I save it as. Or if you're going to do something that has transparency, you have to save it as a PNG file. Multipass, just don't even worry about that right now. Anti-aliasing, don't even worry about it right now. And also if you want to add in effects to this scene, then you hit effect and then add in whatever you want. So for me, I'm going to add what's called global illumination. So this just kind of makes your shadows and a couple other things just look a lot nicer. I'm just going to add this in for this render right now. It adds a bit of render time. I'll tell you that. So if you have a slow machine, I wouldn't recommend adding it. But the issue with it as well is that if I render this out right now, because of how global illumination works, when I was showing you that render, there's a default light built into the scene off the bat. But if you have global illumination on, as you can see now when I hit render, there is absolutely nothing here. And speaking of, if you wanted to see what it looks like inside of the viewport and just see a quick render inside of here, you just click this button here, this render view. The shortcut for that's Control R. And then that will do the rendering inside of here. So if I turn off global illumination for a second just to show you what it would look like for you guys, you just hit render view. That's what it would look like. It just renders it out inside of here so you guys can see what it looks like normally. I'm going to turn that back on. Or if you wanted to see it in a side view, because the issue is the second that you move inside this render view, it's going to actually overwrite that. It's just going to go back to the project view itself. So if you wanted to keep that visible so you can see what it looks like and keep it available and then move around inside the render view, inside the viewport outside of that render, what you do is you just hit this button here, which is render to picture viewer. The shortcut is Shift R. And what that's going to do is that's going to open up a new window and render it out to it. I have global illumination turned on, so I'm going to turn that off really quickly. And if you get this, what this means is that it's calculating the image. Just don't worry about it right now. I'm just going to hit yes. What it'll do is that's going to stop the render and it's going to restart it from whatever changes that you've made. Now I am chugging along here because I'm also recording with OBS Studio, so I apologize. But there we go. So that's what our render looks like now. Beautiful. So if you are using global illumination, if you're planning on using it, if you guys can read up on that in your own time. There's plenty of papers and stuff about how global illumination works. It's a really cool process, but if you are going to use global illumination, just remember that it will make it so it's not visible. So you have to add one of the other things that's important, which is lighting. And I'm going to be doing, there's many videos on lighting. There's hundreds of different ways to do lighting, but just for the case of this scene, I'm just going to add a quick light and kind of move it around a bit. And then I'm going to do some settings you guys don't have to worry about. It's just going to kind of make this look a bit cooler. Just don't even worry about these settings. I'm just showing you this just to show you kind of what this can do. And render to the picture viewer. And wait the 12 years that it will take now for the illumination to go. And while that's going, I just want to say thank you guys for watching. Hopefully this was kind of helpful, and hopefully this kind of helped you guys get started off. If it did, be sure to subscribe. I'm going to be doing some tutorials and doing a bunch of other stuff later on. And I'll be going more in depth into some of the concepts that I covered in this video. I'll be talking about what some of these other buttons do along here, and I'll go more in depth with some other stuff at a later date. So yeah, if you guys enjoyed the video, give it a like. I guess I could probably I'll leave this scene file, I guess, in the description, and then all that you do for that is it will be a .c4d file. So literally you just double click to open it with Cinema 4D, and it will open up if you guys are interested. And yeah, hopefully you guys enjoyed this, and hopefully I provided you with some useful information. Okay, so I will see you guys next video.